Once upon a time, the musical film ruled Hollywood. Studios shelled out millions of dollars to fund filmmakers' desire to build sprawling sets, beautifully ornate costumes, and wonderfully complex musical worlds. In the 1960s, 4 musicals won Best Picture at the Academy Awards. Only one musical film has won Best Picture since 1968.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
Audiences have been interested in movie musicals since the introduction of sound to film with the release of The Jazz Singer in 1927. The Jazz Singer was the first feature film with synchronized recorded music and speech. This monumental piece of film history marked both the end of the silent era and the birth of the musical film. 16 years later, across the country on 44th Street in Manhattan saw the opening of Oklahoma, the game-changing Rodgers and Hammerstein musical that solidified the development of the American book musical, a script, score, and choreography all working together to create a theatrical experience meant to evoke complex emotions, with a variety of musical themes and motifs that tie the story together. This is important. We'll come back to this later. The inventions of sound film and modern musical theater are fairly new in the grand scheme of things, neither yet reaching the age of 100. As two newly invented human art forms, they have grown and shifted alongside each other, for better and worse. And, like any developing form, they've experienced growing pains. Oftentimes, when a great moment of change impacts one medium, the other isn't far behind. We can see these correlations across time. The advent of New Hollywood coincided with the era of the concept musical on Broadway. While families were lined up for 80s blockbusters, tourists flocked to see the 80s mega musical. The 90s saw a rise in independent and diverse film, while Broadway opened itself up to more non-traditional sounds and diverse and challenging stories. And today, each year we see the box office ruled by IP in Hollywood just as equally as on The Great White Way. At the Academy Awards ceremony on April 14, 1969, the name on everyone's lips was Oliver, taking home 6 little gold men, including Best Picture and Best Director. Barbra Streisand won Best Actress for Funny Girl, an award she shared with Katharine Hepburn, the first and only tie in Academy history.
Hello, gorgeous.
Now, it's important to make clear that the Academy Awards aren't the be-all, end-all of what makes an important film, or even what makes a good film. They are just a tool used to paint a more clear image of a film's place in culture at any given time. And tracing these cultural trends throughout the Academy's history helps us to understand how our interests as film viewers have changed. The 1969 Oscar ceremony is significant for being the last time 2 musical films were nominated for Best Picture, Oliver and Funny Girl. That was until 2025. In the past few years, musical movies have made a sort of resurgence in popular culture. Some have made great strides at the box office and have flirted with success at the Academy Awards. Others have been critically panned, made fun of by the general public, and found success at other award shows. Nevertheless, I can't be mad at the output. Studios are giving filmmakers money to make movie musicals. That's a good thing, right? Sure, they refuse to let the audiences know that the movies have singing in them in any of the promotional material, and the actual quality of the films range from okay to terrible, but at least I get to see someone on screen singing and dancing, right? Right? We have a serious problem. The movie musical is broken. Okay, maybe that is a bit extreme, but there is some truth to the fact that audiences aren't as enchanted with the movie musical as they once were. I'm not here to criticize these films, but to examine the ways in which they fail as musicals worthy of joining the pantheon. Why don't these movies work? For us to fully understand why the movie musicals of 2024 are broken, we must understand what makes a movie musical whole. What are the rules? 1. Traditionally, musicals follow a formula. Song is an eruption of intense emotion. When the words to speak don't suffice, a character has no option but to sing. When singing isn't enough, they dance. Speak, sing, dance. Speak, sing, dance. And so on, and so on. 2. There are diegetic and non-diegetic musicals. Diegetic musicals are ones where the songs are taking place in the confines of the world and heard by other characters. Non-diegetic musicals are ones where the songs can't be heard by the other characters, or are more focused on forwarding the plot. The random breaking out into song that many modern film audiences find issue with. Diegetic musicals aren't usually seen as traditional musicals and find much more success with general audiences, which is why you won't see me referring to music biopics like Bohemian Rhapsody or A Complete Unknown, or narrative diegetic musicals like A Star is Born. 3. Many musicals have something called a leitmotif. Now, you may not be familiar with leitmotif by name, but you most definitely know what it is. Listen to this. Or this. Your mind automatically goes somewhere. An evil guy in a black suit or a shark swimming menacingly. That's a leitmotif. A phrase of music attached to a character or theme that recurs and helps to bind together a whole piece of work. It's why the first time you see Jean Valjean in Les Miserables, you hear this. Look down, don't look him in the eye. And the first time Javert confronts him, you hear this. Valjean, at last, we see each other plain. Without saying anything, the music tells you a story. Javert equals order and control, a representation of the former life that Valjean is running away from. With the rules out of the way, let's get to the movies of 2024.
You've seen it. Is it everything you expected?
Between the 60s and 70s, there was a drastic shift in temperature in the worlds of both film and theater. The late 1960s was a revolutionary time in America. The Vietnam War dragged on. The assassinations of JFK and Martin Luther King Jr. rattled the nation. Civil rights protests filled the streets. A sexual revolution and feminist thought challenged traditional values. Overly optimistic and squeaky clean narratives were out. Challenging material was in. The audience desired something more risky, more truthful, more dangerous. Thus, birthed out of counterculture was New Hollywood in the era of the concept musical. Films that spurred the beginning of New Hollywood were younger, fresher, and most importantly, auteur-driven. Films like Bonnie and Clyde, Easy Rider, and The Graduate ushered in a new era in cinema. Likewise, films like New York, New York, and One from the Heart, two auteur-driven takes on the musical film, marked the end of an era. 2019's Joker brought much success, including multiple Academy Award nominations, and was, for a while, the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time. But it also had its criticisms. Many accusations thrown at director Todd Phillips for reheating Scorsese's Nachos, highlighting obvious parallels between Joker and Scorsese films, Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. The much-anticipated sequel, Joker Folie, Deux, released in October 2024 to negative reviews and disappointing box office. The film is ambitious, following Arthur Fleck's descent into madness as he awaits trial for his violent crimes at Arkham State Hospital, where he meets Harley Lee Quinzel, with whom he begins a volatile and romantic relationship. There are many problems with Joker Folie Deux as a film, but that's not what we're here to discuss today. I would argue that it is a complete failure as a musical, a completely soulless and incurious piece of musical storytelling. The question on everyone's mind seemed to be, why did this need to be a musical? Todd Phillips says that it was the only reasonable evolution for the story.
Something Joaquin and I talked about really early on in the first film was that Arthur, while he might be left-footed with the world, while he might be out of step with the world, he has this music inside of him. And that came out in the first movie. Remember, he's dancing in the bathroom, or he dances when he comes out on Murray. So this seemed like a logical place to go.
So, your Joker sequel needs music. Who do we get to write the songs?
It always wanted to feel like stuff that Arthur knew, that maybe his mom played, in the apartment or when he was growing up. Wanted to embrace the kind of old school vibe of music.
Well, it was really about taking the standards and taking things that we've all seen before and kind of putting them through Arthur's eyes. So, what does a musical look like run through the lens of Arthur?
Okay. Instead, we use music from the American Songbook, songs that evoke certain feelings that are in direct contradiction to the violence and depravity of our main character. Joker Folie Deux is part movie musical and part courtroom drama. The theatricality of the courtroom allows the film to put both the character of Arthur Fleck and the mythos of the Joker on trial. This, paired with the addition of musical storytelling, leads us to believe that we will be able to interrogate a new interiority of Arthur Fleck through song. After all, we know the rules. When the words to speak don't suffice, a character has no option but to sing. What better place is there for us to see new sides of a character than through a revealing ballad? But we're never given that opportunity. We are supposed to look past uninteresting blocking and uninspired choreography because the cinematography and overall craft on display is incredible. But what becomes clear is that Todd Phillips isn't someone who is interested in musical filmmaking. The songs are treated as disposable, a surface-level attempt to deepen our connection to these characters through a medium in which emotions run free, without doing the work of any new character interrogation. The titular Folie à Deux is the music itself. The shared delusion between Arthur and Lee lies in the fabric of the musical world they've created together. It's through music that they meet, and it should be the driving force, or the conflict, or something. That's the problem, though. The music serves no purpose. The story of their fantasy doesn't correspond with the story of their reality. How does their shared musical world influence their real world? I'd argue hardly at all. The musical numbers are just there to add spectacle. One number momentarily rises above this: If You Could See Me Now. In this number, Lady Gaga's Lee pulls Arthur Fleck into the musical fantasy. The song solidifies their dangerous love, Lee's influence on Arthur, and is activated by their attempt to escape Arkham. A spotlight shines on the two as they are literally singing in the rain. Some numbers, like The Joker Is Me or To Love Somebody, aren't treated as musical numbers that further the plot. Rather, they are sort of variety show moments, fantastical diversions that put Arthur's fears and anxieties on display, often paired with a shockingly violent gag. Songs don't come from an overflowing buildup of emotion, rather they float in and out as a break in the story, which leads to a disjointed experience that questions its very reason for being a musical. Emotion, music, and reality are three separate streets that very seldom converge. It's these choices that make the musical moments feel extremely unmotivated. The actors repeatedly bring up how they wanted the singing to be raw and real, and how they needed it to be sang live to capture the reality of it.
But there's nothing polished about it. It should be rough around the edges.
You know, Lee's not a great singer.
There had to be like a rawness to the character.
Kind of divorce all of my stage tricks or things that feel natural to me emotionally as a singer, because Lee's not a singer.
In approaching the songs, it needs to feel like it's come from Arthur.
Say with Joaquin, just reminding him that he can be just as raw with his vocals as he is with his acting. For me, it was a lot about kind of unlearning technique and forgetting how to breathe. You know, Lee's not a performer, and I am, and in a scene as a different character, it's just completely different. It's Lee's reality, it's their shared reality, it's coming from that character, not from me as a performer.
While at the same time wanting us to believe that the whole musical nature of the film is due to their shared delusion. Why then are they not allowed to sound good? Realism dictates that a young man mixed up in a New York City turf war shouldn't be an amazing singer. Yet we don't bat an eye when he runs through the streets singing Maria, because it is an explosion of feeling, a declaration of love from his heart that can't be kept in any longer. And frankly, that's just the medium we're working in. There is a fascination with realism, a desire to strip away the main conceit of what a musical is to make it more grounded and believable, and perhaps more palatable to an audience who will normally shy away from the absurdity of a person breaking out into song, but likewise alienates the audience who loves them. It feels disingenuous to rely on the pathos and nostalgia related to the aesthetic of movie musicals while not fully embracing the extremities of the world. Richard Brody writes in The New Yorker, "The musical images in Folie à Deux fall short of a comprehensive visual conception. They're largely just commonplace visual recordings that, despite elaborate sets, offer little sense of style. It's as if Phillips were satisfied with evoking the idea of musical fantasy scenes and provided them with little identity of their own. That's just the thing. Folie à Deux is less interested in being a movie musical as it is interested in tapping into the emotions that are attached with being a movie musical. It thinks that by touching on golden age nostalgia, much of the work is done for it, just as Joker did with its allusions to Taxi Driver, the king of comedy, and its overall Scorsese fetishism. The fact is, Todd Phillips wasn't interested in making a musical. He was interested in making an anti-musical.
This is serious!
Is something distracting you?
November 17th, 1989 ushered in a new era for the Walt Disney Company with the release of The Little Mermaid. It was something different, a kids' film filled with characters with strong wishes and desires, flashy production numbers, and good, actually really good, music.
I'm no Seymour's the greatest, but I'm dating a semi-sadist.
Howard Ashman and Alan Menken were plucked from the world of Broadway into the world of animation to create the original songs for The Little Mermaid. But what they also brought with them was their experience with crafting musical stories. For the first time, Disney Animation embraced the Broadway musical form, and what came next was their most bona fide hit in years. This was the beginning of the Disney Renaissance, a reinvigoration for the studio after its founder's death and subsequent years struggling to create films that captured the public like the ones from its golden age. The birth of the Disney Renaissance brought upon a new form, an animated film that closely resembled a Broadway musical. Now, Disney didn't create the I Want song. That is an old musical theater convention repurposed by Ashman.
This kind of song exists in the Broadway musical from Wouldn't It Be Loverly, Eliza Doolittle, and My Fair Lady, tells us what she wants, Rodgers and Hammerstein. Every show, the leading lady has a chance to plunk herself down on a tree trunk somewhere and to sing about what she dreams about. And she sings, "This is what I want." It's called the Girls I Want song.
At a certain point, the I Want song became almost synonymous with the Disney animated film. It was a way to immediately connect to the characters, to understand that Belle wants so much more than they've got planned, or that Hercules wants to go the distance. The Little Mermaid allowed Disney to create their own formula through their animated musical films, a formula that has, until very recently, gone unbroken. In November 2024, Disney released Moana 2, their much anticipated sequel to 2016's Moana. During a Disney Investor Day meeting, Jennifer Lee announced the project as Moana the Series, what was supposed to be a 5-episode musical comedy series. In February 2024, Disney CEO Bob Iger announced the series had been reworked as a film for theatrical release. Moana 2 isn't a terrible movie. What it is the tattered remnant of its old identity as a limited series, torn apart and stitched back together to make a lackluster cash grab. You can feel where the new character storylines had to be cut due to timing. The awkward pacing and bad character development is an obvious result of this retooling. Mark Mancina and Opatawa Fawai returned to score the film, while a new writing team was brought in to replace Lin-Manuel Miranda in writing the film's original songs. Abigail Barlow and Emily Baer, writers of the unofficial Bridgerton musical. Lin-Manuel Miranda's presence is definitely missed. The music of Moana was one of the things that took it to new heights. Miranda is an experienced Broadway composer. He understands how to flawlessly integrate music with story, how to use motifs to evoke genuine emotion, and his lyrical ability is exceptional. The songs he writes come from specificity and character.
But the other really big lesson in Howard Ashman's work was that he brought not just his incredible lyric writing, but his sense of musical structure and his incredible storytelling sense. I'll never forget the first table read I sat for Moana. Someone sort of turned around and said to me, like, don't forget to raise your hand, because like we all are going to be doodling and we know what we do, but we don't do what you do. So like raise your hand and tell us what musicals can do in this space that we don't know. That's the real legacy of Howard Ashman, I think, to me, is that he brought so many of the incredible like musical theater techniques to animated film.
Most of the music in Moana 2 is lacking. The music isn't bad, it just doesn't propel the story. It oftentimes feels like an animated movie with musical numbers rather than a musical film, like the great films of the Disney Renaissance. Take How Far I'll Go, the greatest I Want song of Disney's modern era.
Sometimes, who we wish we were, what we wish we could do, it's just not meant to be.
Moana's mother says this to her the moment before the song begins. This propels us into Moana's questioning of all that she knows.
I've been staring at
Every single story element is clear through the lyric. Her desire constantly pulls her outward towards the sea.
I know everybody on this island.
This repetition of island solidifies her attachment to her home and the monumental place it holds in her life. It all comes back to the island. There is a curiosity to both the lyrics and the composition. She questions things. Then, as the song evolves, she makes a decision. A familiar form, but it's different from Part of Your World or Belle, because by the end of the song, she's taken the thing that she wants. It doesn't come to her. Allowing her to make the decision activates the song and sets her apart as a truly modern Disney princess. The I Want song in Moana 2 is Beyond, a pretty good song that retreads similar ground. I'm sure a working title for it was How Much Further I'll Go. The song is sonically very interesting, but the content doesn't seem to bring anything new to the character. It's less of an I want song than it is an I must song. The decision is made, and this time the work isn't done around the song to make clear to us the stakes and to differentiate why this journey is any different than her last. In the first film, You're Welcome serves as an introduction to the character of Maui, a trickster demigod obsessed with himself. Miranda crafts a perfectly multi-layered number that introduces us to Maui's braggadocious nature and sets us clearly in his perspective as a savior. It's active storytelling while planting seeds for his flaws that will turn into his downfall, arrogance and insecurity disguised by charm. Lin-Manuel's amazing wordplay is an added bonus. Can I Get a Chi-Ho attempts to mirror the greatness of You're Welcome, but fails to also be an active song that feels at all necessary. It serves as a number of encouragement that tells us nothing more about either character. The visuals portray a funhouse-style obstacle course, then the characters are launched into space before Maui takes it home with an electric fire conch solo. Completely unintelligible visuals that have little to do with the story or the characters. Its only goal is to be stimulating. It tries to mimic the magical, colorful production number that is You're Welcome, except the latter had an active intent. The entire number doubles as a distraction Maui uses to steal the boat that he needs.
And thank you!
In The Little Mermaid, Sebastian sings Under the Sea to cheer up Ariel in a time of need, and a reminder of how amazing life is, well, under the sea. It's a calypso-infused number, complete with a lobster playing the steel drums, and he recruits basically the entire ocean to put on a production number to remind Ariel of how good she's got it. There's even an aquatic orchestra instrument breakdown at the bridge, paired with Ashman cleverly rhyming the names of 12 different sea creatures with instruments. This flashy production is filled with beautiful animation and creative staging, but at its core, it is a plea to get Ariel to stay at home and forget the world above. The punchline is that, in the midst of all the chaos, she gets away just before the finale.
Ariel? Oh, somebody's got to nail that girl's fins to the floor.
Intent, action, and conflict. These are all things Can I Get a Chi-Ho lack that the other two examples are rich with. It even tries to mimic Miranda's clever lyrics and wordplay, but ends up failing. There's a larger problem with Moana 2, its story. It is so apparent that this thing has been ripped apart and put back together that any coherent sense of storytelling has been thrown out the window. So of course the music doesn't always feel like it's in service to the story, because we're only seeing parts of it. We're introduced to a whole cast of new characters that never really get any development. The scenes don't flow naturally into the songs because it's all a chopped up mess. Maybe it would work if the Bat Lady villain had a whole episode to explain her plight that ended with her diva-coded musical number full of vague implications and words of support. But in the context of the story, it feels like an excuse to add in a song, and it ends up screeching the action to a halt, which is the last thing you want your musical number to do. Occasionally, Bear and Barlow will interpolate a motif from the original Moana and all the emotions will come rushing back, but it is solely based on our relationship to the previous material. Bear and Barlow are very talented writers, they just aren't musical theater writers, and they don't have an intrinsic understanding of how to meld story and song yet. Menken and Ashman understood to make these films they had to treat them as musicals first. That's what made them special. Disney thinks they can recycle this formula without putting in the necessary groundwork, and what we ended up with was a vapid and hollow sequel to something that originally had a lot of heart.
And thank you to Emilia. Please,
Émilia Perez is a fascinating film to analyze as a largely hated and divisive piece of art that has been mired with controversies. The film was developed by Jacques Audiard from what was originally supposed to be an opera libretto in 4 acts. He brought aboard Clément Ducal and Camille to write original songs, and Damien Jallet to choreograph the musical sequences. Now, I don't think I need to add any more to the vitriol that has been thrown at Émilia Perez. The internet has got that covered. I will admit that on the first watch, I didn't hate it. I thought it was wildly creative and potentially offensive, but overall felt like it was an appropriately mid movie with some interesting ideas. I appreciated the inventiveness, and there was a sense of melodrama that was super intriguing, especially when paired with the great performances from Zoe Saldana and Carla Sofia Gascon. The first act is admittedly pretty mystifying. When we meet Zoe Saldana's Rita in the streets of backlot France posing as Mexico, and the language of movement comes from seemingly nowhere until the entire city is taking part in this flurry of dance and song that feels sharp, jagged, and dangerous, it's honestly super compelling. The problem is that things fall apart very quickly. One of the biggest critiques about Émilia Perez is the overall lack of good music. The music in the film is tuneless, mostly rambles of inner consciousness that are at times sung at barely a whisper. To be frank, they're not catchy. You don't leave the movie humming any of them, except maybe La Vaginoplasty.
From penis to vagina.
This is not innately a bad thing. A catchy tune does not a good musical make, as the great Stephen Sondheim would argue. Émilia Perez was originally developed as an opera, whose musical language is a bit different than the American book musical. In opera, recitative is a style of delivery in which a singer adopts the rhythms and delivery of ordinary speech. They are most often used to further the plot and deliver necessary information. Many of the songs in Émilia Perez take on the qualities of recitative. They are often tuneless because they are conversations. The film is more indebted to the operatic tradition than the American book musical. However, the writing is still very weak. Camille worked with Mexican consultants to write the song in Spanish, so at times the songs went through 3 levels of translation, from French to Spanish to English, and what comes of it is awkward lyrics that end up saying nothing. The words come across clumsily and oftentimes do very little to forward the plot due to their confused nature. Take the first act song, Lady, for example. Rita tries to convince an Israeli doctor to perform gender-affirming surgeries for Émilia.
Doctor, you don't know what it's like to be a queen. When you were born to strive and race to kill, you better dance or die.
What? Almost all the lyrics are like this, vague and confusing. Maybe there's meaning there if you really dig into it, but in a musical number like this, it's essential to have an understanding of each character's argument and why they feel the way they feel. It's like they knew they wanted there to be a song at this moment where the doctor doesn't feel right about doing Emilia's procedure and Rita needs to convince him, yet they filled the song with a bunch of nothing, half-assed arguments. They still get to the intended destination in the end without having earned it. The characters are reaching the point of intense emotion, but what comes out is unintelligible. Another part of the operatic musical language is the aria, a lyrical song for a solo voice that allows the characters to express their emotions or to reflect on the events of the stories thus far. Rita's El Mal is an example of this, a moment of fantasy where she is allowed to comment on the hypocrisy and corruption of the donors who fund her and Emilia's nonprofit. The character of Émilia Perez is one who should fit perfectly into this operatic world, a larger-than-life character who struggles with wanting to build a better life and the demons in her past. It is ultimately a tragedy where a character's flaw destroys everything they've built. The storytelling potential here is ripe, yet when we get to the point of the story that allows Émilia to explore her innermost emotions, we get this.
Medio ella, medio papá, medio tía, medio rica, medio pobre, medio jefe, medio reina, medio aquí, medio allá, medio muerto, medio viva, medio dentro, medio fuera, todo, nada. ¿Quién soy? No lo sé. Yo soy lo que siento. Y por primera vez siento un sentimiento.
The song is spurred by Emilia's relationship with Epifania, a woman whose abusive husband's remains were identified by Emilia's nonprofit. It is a song that's half a love song, half a deep character interrogation, and by trying to be both, it fails to be either. The music never reveals a deeper internal perspective of who Emilia is and the incredible change she's going through. Rather, we see her through others. Even a song about this change is greatly influenced by her new relationship, and the writing is just simplified to being half one thing and half another, when the reality seems to be a lot more complex than that. I think the overall sound of Émilia Perez struggles due to a lack of leitmotifs. There is nothing to bind the musical sound together. Each song happens and then fades away into nothing. They aren't not memorable because they're not catchy. They're not memorable because there's no connective tissue. This lack of binding never allows the music to come together as a coherent whole, thus never allowing the music to take the audience on an emotional journey from beginning to end. It lends itself to a disjointed experience, a sort of start and stop level of enjoyment because script, music, and choreography are not all working together to create a singular feeling. There is no binding, so the already weak themes fall apart at the seams. Which begs the question, why did this story need to be a musical? The writers weren't able to fully or competently explore the themes. It ultimately fails to have any groundbreaking conversations on all the complex issues it presents, and ends with the simplifier of praising Emilia for all the good she's done, while really failing to ever fully face the bad. 2024 was a hard year for the movie musical. Maybe the symbiotic relationship between theater and film is at a point where it is cannibalizing itself, and where creators are desperately seeking to make something that exists outside the already established framework in a way to stand out. Movies like Joshua Oppenheimer's The End try to make big swings in reimagining the musical genre, and miss. Movies like Mean Girls complete the movie to musical back to movie pipeline to a middling reception. Then there's Wicked, a long-awaited film adaptation of a beloved Broadway musical that somehow found the perfect balance between critical, financial, and award success. There's a love for the musical form that emanates from everyone involved. It is fully and shamelessly a musical. Interesting choreography and staging, dynamic camera work, and incredibly strong performances by actors who can sing. So, why did these other musical films fail the way they did? These movies were made by people who are interested in making musicals, but not by people who love musicals. And it shows. They're terrified of succumbing to the pitfalls that come with musical filmmaking, and instead try to diminish what makes them unique, instead of embracing the genre fully. 2024 will be fascinating to look back on for years to come, a sort of perfect encapsulation of all the things a movie musical can be, and maybe even a turning point in musical film history. In 2025, only one musical film is scheduled to come out, Wicked for Good. I don't think it would be fair to give up on the movie musical as if it's something broken that can't be fixed. I think we have to remember the origins and not be ashamed of where we came from. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching my video. I'm a musical theater actor and a filmmaker and an amateur film historian, so this kind of brought together all of my interests. But I can't wait to make more deep dive videos on film history, directors' filmographies, how musical theater and film have grown alongside each other. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe so that we can go on this journey together. And this is all about starting a conversation. So if you disagreed with me, please let me know in the comments and start the conversation amongst yourselves. I would love to know what you think. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.